Okie dokie. Grecia, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Thanks a lot for having me, Joe.
Oh, well, I would love to start with our normal quick fire round of questions to hear who you are, where you're from, and where you're based now.
Yeah, sure. Well, I actually was born in Venezuela, South America, and I was born and raised there till the age of 16, roughly, when I decided I wanted to study it abroad. And I mean, till then, I had, travel a little bit here and there, but the mainstream places as we call them, so like the US and a little bit of like other South American countries. But I was very curious to see the world and just study somewhere else. And I thought, okay, I came across this scholarship where I basically could do like my international baccalaureate in another country, and then I applied for it. And I remember, you have to take a test. It's quite competitive, so you need to take a test. Then you need to do some type of retreat, and then finally you have the final interview. And when I did the final interview, they asked me, okay, what are the places where you would like to go? And I remember I chose the places by, okay, where is like the farthest I can visit. Since these people are anyways going to pay for my education, where can I go? And I remember, I think I put Italy on the list because I thought, well, if I go there, I could learn Italian. And then second, I put Singapore, and third, Hong Kong, and something like this. And I got picked up, and basically, I moved to Singapore for a couple of years. So I spent 2 years in Singapore. That was really great. I think at that age, just being abroad, living abroad without your parents, it's a great learning opportunity. And you just really realize, or at least I realized the world was so small, and so big at the same time, right? Like it really made me curious to get to know other places. And then after that, I
So hang
went
on,
back to.
can I interrupt you there? So
Sure.
you were 16 and you came and did 2 years, your final 2 years of school in Singapore by yourself?
Right, right. So for the ones who don't know, I went to United World College, Southeast Asia, and there you have a boarding school. So I stay at the boarding school, because actually I did not want to go. So back then, it was really common for my friends to just do like a gap year, right? And they would just go to another, like a host family, and they would stay with the host family. But I thought, okay, I don't want to go to any host family because you always run the risk that the family is really bad and you don't really get along with the family. So I thought I don't want to do that. So I went to a boarding school. So that was really great.
I see. Thank you for
Yeah.
clarifying. I was just then picturing you getting plonked over in another country, and I was picturing you being with a host family. So thank you for clarifying that it was a boarding school. Got you.
Yeah, so it was at the boarding school, and after I went back to Venezuela for just a little bit for my undergrad, and then again I knew I wanted to be abroad, and I decided again to come back to Asia, and then I did my master's in Japan because back then my thought was I want to go back and work in Asia for a few years, so I rather just go there and study. So I did my master's in my MBA in Japan. I was in Kyoto for a couple of years, which was great because I think Kyoto is real Japan. It's so traditional, it's so beautiful, and there are so many students. So as a student, it's a great city. It's also not too busy. It's not that expensive like Tokyo. So as a student, it's a pretty great place. So I was there for 2 years, and then I moved to Tokyo for work. So I was there for about 3 years. I was working in mergers and acquisitions, so I was really really busy. I had a lot of business trips that I also had to deal with a lot of like the typical Japanese corporate culture. So that was really great learning, but really, really tough. And after 5 years in Japan, I thought, okay, I think it's time to get out of Japan because I was getting really tired of the work culture. And at the same time, back then, my boyfriend, then my husband today, we were doing long distance for about 4 years. And then we said, okay, either we now break up or we go somewhere together. So I moved to Germany, and then he followed me. And I was working in Germany, also for one of the companies there, in in-house consulting, and we loved it. We really loved Germany. I think it was, I moved to so many places, and I always felt there was no place where I would like to stay for the long term. But Germany somehow had the things that I like the most. I mean, for people who move around, they kind of realize there's no perfect place. You just kind of find a place that you like, and then you say, okay, I can, live with the positive things that I have here, and the negatives, it's okay, I can handle them. So Germany somehow had a good combination between Japan, like the order and people following the rules, and people being giving you some privacy. So I really like that. At the same time, Germany allowed me to have a private life, which was really difficult for me in Japan, with work, and it really allowed me to also enjoy life, enjoy life again. And then we really loved it. We love nature, we love hiking, so we really enjoyed it there. But after 5 years in in Germany, and after having our child there, we had an opportunity to come to Singapore, and then, yeah, why not? Then we are here in Singapore for maybe 3 years or so. We don't know yet. And yeah, this is kind of a little bit of my summary, of why I've moved to so many different places, but also why I like to, move around so much.
Mm. So this time you've moved with your husband's job to Singapore?
Right. So this is really the first time in my life, I would say, where I follow or I move somewhere because of someone else. Until then, it was always me driving this move, right? Like the Singapore one, the first time was me. Then Japan was completely me. Germany, to some extent, it was me because he's the one who followed. This is the first time when I said, okay, I'll follow you and I'll come to Singapore. Of course, it was a known place, so I guess that was also really nice. But it was also very different because it was at a moment in my life when I was in a transition, right? I just became a mother. Um, I I had my baby, which was also a huge shift for me because I was always very career driven, and oh, okay, I was always very career driven, and trying to pursue my dreams and studies and all of that. And at that time I was on maternity leave, and I thought, okay, let's just go and we will figure it out. I definitely want to go back to work, but we will figure it out. So it was, yeah, it was a very nice decision, but it was also very tough, to be honest.
So, well, quick question of where's your husband from?
Well, yeah, so he's Indian.
Indian, and you met in Japan, or where did you guys meet?
Actually, when I was in Japan, I was doing my MBA there, and the last semester, one of my professors said, "Look, there is this Indian university, where you can do an exchange program, and it's really good. You should definitely try it out." It's called IMCAL. I'm sure for your Indian listeners, this is a very famous university there, so they probably know it, in Calcutta. And I thought, it's my last semester in Japan. I did not know back then if I would stay in Japan. So I was really like, should I really leave Japan or not? But then I thought, okay, what are the chances that I could be in India for, 4 months or so? If I don't like it, I just, do something else. And I went there, and I was looking, while I was there, I was looking for someone to practice business cases. For those of you who go into consulting, you know that you need to take a very rigorous, you know, interviews, and it's quite tough. So you need to practice a lot. And one of my friends said, "Oh, great! I have this guy just came back from the US, and he's got into one of these big consulting firms. Maybe he can practice with you." And we met. And when I first met him, I just thought, oh, this guy's actually really nice. I wish I could get to know him better. But in my mind, I mean, it always takes me a lot of time to get to, know people. I'm an introvert. So it's really rare for me to just start dating someone like in a week or so. So, but somehow I thought this guy was really nice and really cool. So we started talking, just doing business cases, like that's it. Um, but after a while, I realized I really liked him, like really, really liked him, and the same from his side. So we decided, okay, let's just try, and we started dating. And long story short, after 4 months, we said, okay, let's try long distance. And that's
You did
how it
that for
happened.
4 years? 4 years?
Yeah,
Wow.
4 years. Of course, I think it really helped that we were really busy. I was working a lot of hours in Japan, and he was also working really, really long hours in India. And then he moved to Dubai, and he was also very busy. So that really helped. But I think after 4 years, we were ready to, to like move to the next stage. Let's put it this way.
Oh, funny. Okay, so talk me through then. I want to go back in time to, because I'm always a bit intrigued when there is a husband that is trailing along. And so I want to sort of hear about what those first sort of few months or first 12 months was like in Germany for you as the working spouse, having a spouse that had sort of followed along with you. What was that experience like for you guys in Germany?
Yeah. So I moved to Germany in I think August 2017, and um, of course the idea was that he would also work there, but probably for all the trailing spouses out there, sometimes when you move to a place, you sometimes don't have a lot of. Sometimes you do, but sometimes you don't have a lot of options. So in his case, actually, he had a really great career. He was doing really great at this really big consulting firm in India and then Dubai. So he found a job relatively quickly in Germany. So by January, he was already working. So, but of course, it was. So he started working, but it was probably not the work that he like, that the job was not like the perfect job for him. It was good, but I think he took it because he wanted to be in the same country as me, right? So I think for a couple of years he struggled with the fact that it was not the kind of, I think, kind of work he wanted to do. He was still in a very nice company and in the strategy department, but I think he wanted something a bit more challenging. That was the main thing. And after a couple of years, he switched jobs to where he's working right now, and it was really great. And that moment, actually, we moved cities because back then I was traveling a lot for work, and I could basically be based out of anywhere. So we moved closer to his job. So I guess to your question, we didn't really struggle, or let's say we didn't really struggle with the fact that he was not working, but we definitely struggled with the fact that he was not in the type of work that he wanted to do. So that was really challenging, of course, for him, and for me as well. I think for the relationship, because I think at some point, sometimes you resent the other person. You say, okay, I obviously no one forces anyone to move anywhere. And this is this has to be very clear. In our case, we never forced each other, but of course you resent that maybe you left your career at a time that you shouldn't have. or that your spouse is maybe having. I was back then traveling a lot for business, so I was having a lot of projects in the US, and I was having a really, you could say, interesting career, right? Or very, at least it looked very busy and really good. And I guess he was a bit like, okay, where am I going? Where am I heading? So it definitely put some, um, yeah, some challenges in the relationship. But I think we kept talking, and somehow I guess when he changed jobs, that also really helped because he gave him a sense of purpose again, right? And yeah.
Mm. It's interesting because, and I'm interested because you then switch it up, and like you said, this is then your relocation to Singapore was the first time that it had actually been you doing the following. So talk me through what those first few months were like in Singapore.
That was definitely, I think that was, so it's been really great, and it's been really tough at the same time. So just to give some background, we moved to Singapore in November 2022. And I had my baby in December 2021. So he was, not even 1 year when we moved there. And in Germany, we're very privileged that you can take a very long maternity leave. So my initial idea, so let's go even back, right? I was pregnant and this opportunity came up, and uh, we thought, oh yeah, I said, yeah, I think it's great. We evaluated it. We said, this is good for the family. Let's just do it. My work back then was really flexible, and I have offices in other countries. So I thought we can always make it work. It's not this first time I go to another country and I find a job, right? Um, then we moved to Singapore in November, and back then the idea was that I would start working in February of the following year in my same role, but in another location, right? Um, but this didn't happen because uh, let's say we had some legal issues because my office used to have an office in Singapore, but we closed it down. And that meant I couldn't get a visa to work here because then, it's very strict here for the listeners who are not in Singapore. It's not so easy for companies to justify that you have a person in Singapore working for a unit that you actually closed down a few months back, right? So basically, in December 2022, my office said, sorry, we cannot do delegation there, but we still support you. We have to find a role for you there, or we have to see. So I think that was the hardest because I thought I could go back to work, but I couldn't, and I had no time. It was very uncertain whether I can go back to work. Um, can I go to work with my same office? Can I go back to work at all? Because as a mother as well, I had been out of the workforce for a while, and that somehow also makes you think, can I do it or not? So um, that was that was really really tough for me. I think Singapore, in a sense, it's a great country, right? With a kid, and I already knew it, so I had some type of network here from my high school years, but you still, as a mother, you're a very different person. It's 20 years later. So think about it, right? Like your friends, the people you know, already in Germany, I had a network of moms that I knew. I already felt comfortable. So actually, this is a very interesting topic because sometimes people think because you have moved countries a lot, you just you adapt very quickly, and yes, you adapt very quickly, but people have to also understand that this is always tough, and sometimes the circumstances in your life are different. When you move as a student or when you move as a single person, it's different maybe when you move when you have a family, because now you have a child, and you also need to make sure you can find a good network for your child. And also then maybe you're not able to go back to work right away because then you cannot put your kid in childcare right away. So all these things add up. So I think that was a very tough time for me. Again, I was a bit like, okay, what do I do now? Fortunately, I was able to put my contract as dormant in Germany, um, so to continue on maternity leave. And then I decided, okay, I try to continue to find a role within my same company here in Singapore, or I continue to apply to other companies. So I kind of was doing that. Um, and for also for your listeners who are in Singapore and not in Singapore, I am on a dependent pass here in Singapore. There's lots of myths about this dependent pass. So the reality is you cannot work with a dependent pass. So that makes it obviously more difficult. You need to find a company that is able to sponsor your EP, your employment pass. And I heard so many times, okay, this is impossible. You will never get a company to sponsor your employment pass. And I thought, okay, but why is this so impossible? Is this really so difficult? So reality is it's somewhere in the middle, right? I think some people really struggle to get companies to sponsor their employment pass, and some people actually get it very quick. It really depends a little bit on your skills. It depends on your industry. Some industries, maybe my industry, which is more business oriented, it's a bit more open and more flexible. Maybe some other industries is really, really hard. I was lucky enough that I don't need to get any new license or any, I don't need to take any tests. But maybe if you're a doctor or whatnot, a lawyer, it's pretty much impossible to work in this country. So for me, I just said, okay, I will take the time to be with my son. I'm very fortunate, to be honest, I'm very fortunate to be able, or I've been very fortunate to be able to spend almost 2 years with him. For those of you who are parents, you know that the first year they change every day. And then the second year it becomes more stable, but they're still changing a lot. And be able to be with him almost entire day was really, really nice. It really gave me a lot of joy to see him develop and also me develop as a mother. Um, and at the same time, trying to find my own path on what I want to do going forward. So, yeah, I will start working next month. I was fortunate enough to be able to find a company that can sponsor my visa here. It's actually a sister company of my previous company. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to also now, going back to a little bit of my own activities and my own life. Yeah.
Mm. So you're in an interesting spot because you're transitioning out of this sort of well, I don't know, I hear it described so much as this sort of frustration limbo of being in this frustrated situation and frustrating situation where you're wanting to do things, and like you said, a lot of people find it really, really challenging to find work. And then there's these tensions around like enjoying doing the parenting side of things and the being at home with kids and those sorts of things. So what are you sort of having to get your head around as far as like re-entering the workforce after having a chunk of time out of there?
Yeah, and before I answer your question, I want to say something that maybe it's interesting for the listeners because I was reflecting on this the other day. Sometimes I mean, really throws a lot of things at you, and I mean, I've been in also very tough situations before this time, and I think, of course, you feel frustrated, and I was feeling, yeah, depressed, frustrated. I mean, you feel like you're kind of stuck. You feel I have no way out, but you always have a way out. There's always something you can do. There's always something you can focus your energy on. I think it's very important to understand that you cannot control what happens to you in a sense, but you can always control a little bit how you react and what you do about it. And I know sometimes this is very easy to say, but it's also a little bit about rephrasing your your state. So I remember when it was really hard in this period of December, February, when I really was like, okay, my one chance to go back to work is gone. What can I do? And there are days that you feel, of course, very low, and you feel like, oh, maybe your son is not napping. You have no work. Like I remember, I told my husband one day, oh my God, I went from spending time, working in very uh, important meetings that you would think, to go back to trying to put a kid to bed for 3 hours, something like this, right? So of course it's very frustrating, and of course you feel like, is this what I'm supposed to do? But at the same time, I started kind of thinking, okay, but this is it. This is my situation right now. Maybe I can try to focus on the good things, and slowly try to say, okay, I have some time to, just take a nap in the afternoon, which I could have never done if I'm working, or I had the time to see my child develop. So we would go every day to the botanical gardens and just enjoy, just walk, you know, having this no a sense of no rush. Just, do as you want to do. Um, and this really helped me get through the tough days, like just rephrasing and trying to focus on the positive side of it. Also, focusing on the fact that now I have more time to maybe read or learn something that I always wanted to learn. So I started relearning a language, right? I'm now learning German, and I also doing a course on positive psychology. So I started focusing on trying to use my time in the best of ways, right? Um, and this really helped me, to get through the tough times. And of course, now that I go back to the workforce, is a very interesting feeling, because um, I was telling my husband the other day, when I have now sometimes business calls in preparation for my job, actually it feels like no time has passed sometimes, right? I'm there. It feels like, oh, it was just yesterday I was working. So it really feels like nothing. At the same time, time has passed. So I'm sure it will be challenging. I'm sure I've talked to other colleagues that also took very long maternity leave, and they say, yeah, the first few months you have no, like, you just feel so, it's so difficult, because you also have now a kid, right? That you also need to juggle. It's not just you working and going back to your previous life. It's you with an extra component. So I'm sure it will be challenging, but I think, like everything in life, it takes a little bit of time. I mean, you move to another country, it takes maybe a month or so, actually even longer, to get used to your place. You change jobs, it also takes you a little bit of adjustment. You have a kid, it takes you a lot of time to get used to it. At least it did to me. So I'm sure it works out.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm thrilled for you. That's really exciting because, like you said, it's not a quite often a common thing that people are able to do, particularly in this part of the world. Is
Yeah,
there?
but I also want to tell people, I mean, you have to keep trying, because at the end of the day you always have a choice. If you already give up, then that's it. You have to keep trying. And maybe, okay, for me it was this job, but if I hadn't got a job, I was ready to maybe just start something on my own or do something. I think you can always do something. And I know it's not easy for everyone, and I know there are bills to pay, and there are things to do. But what I want to say is there are always opportunities, and you have to try to see these opportunities. You cannot be, optimistic in a unrealistic way. That's not what I strive for. But I think you need to be aware that there's always something that you can do, and
I think that that's really great advice. Is there something that you wish you had known before you left Germany?
I mean, I guess I would have liked to know, maybe, okay, I would have liked to know, yeah, how difficult it is maybe to um or not how difficult, but basically in Singapore, I think the way to find also jobs is through connections, right? So um how the market was and also what my possibilities were. But to be honest, sometimes these things you only know when you move here. So I think it's sometimes you need to be in the midst of it to kind of know, what to do. To be honest, I think for me the most challenging and what I would have liked to know more was probably more on the kids side, also on the childcare side. Actually, when I don't know how it is in other countries, but in Germany and in also a lot of European countries, it's pretty straightforward. You apply for childcare. Childcare is about the same everywhere. Yeah, some are better, some are not, but the variation is not so high. And then your kid goes there, and then you go back to work or whatever, and then that's it. I felt like in Singapore, it took me so long to navigate the whole childcare system. It was really, really challenging. And as a first time mom, also, there's so many things you just don't know. Um, and there are so many options in Singapore. There are so many like places, but in reality, I felt there are very few because the quality is really different among them. So I think as a mom, I would have liked to have a more, clear picture on this entire childcare scenario. Because also, if you're a working mom, it's something you really need right quite quickly. And if you're not working, eventually you will need to put your kid in childcare or in kindergarten. So this is something I would have liked to have more information about, also to lower my my anxiety levels back then. Um, but I would say other than that, the most important is that you kind of understand what you're getting yourself into, right? Like to some extent, but you're also not able to know everything in advance. Sometimes you just know it once you're there. So you also need to, let go and say, okay, once I'm there, I kind of try to figure it out.
I think that is just, I was about to ask you if you had a little piece of gold nugget advice to end on. And I think that actually is just the most beautiful thing there. And I think that's something that I think I sometimes still just need to hear every now and then as well, is that like just being present. And I know that sounds a bit woo woo, and sometimes people, that whole mindfulness thing and taking each day as it comes, which I find very challenging because I am a planner. I like to know what I'm doing 10 years in advance. I know those plans change, but I like having plans. And so when people are like, just chill out and just, take it as it comes, that is triggering for me. But I think that it's really good advice to sometimes just sort of remind yourself to be like, wait until you get to somewhere, wait until that situation arises. Don't try and doomsday things and plan everything within an inch of its life, so that there's not room for flexibility and for opportunity to sort of happen.
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm also a planner. My natural state is planning everything, but actually, I, I think for a few years now, I kind of realize you have to you have to find a balance, right? I I also, so I think everyone has like a different, personality and way of doing things. I also cannot be completely uncertain on what's going to happen, but the reality is you can also not plan your life for the next 10 years. I mean, what I do is I kind of say, okay, this is a path that I would like to take. But you have to be open to changing that path, because if that had not happened, for example, I always said I don't want to have kids. I don't want to be a mother. This was very clear for me. And after I was, I think after 35, I said, okay, every year I will revisit this, right? And that, but in my mind, I was 95% sure that I would not become a mother. Um, and then I became a mother, and I decided, okay, why not? Maybe it's something I want to do. Let's give it a try. And it has been really wonderful, right? So, um,
Let's give it a try. If I don't really like this, then I'll just change this later.
yeah, true, exactly. So I think, of course, you cannot give it back, but but I just said, okay, let's try it. Yeah, the thing with I think being a mother was the first thing as well that I was not able to take back, because when you go to another country, you always say, well, if you don't like it, you can always go back to the other country or do something else. But what I want to say is, I think, you know, I've always been a person of very middle. So I usually don't take very extreme sides. I don't live my life at the extreme. And that is also with the way I conduct my decisions. So yes, you want to have a plan. You also maybe want to know, well, where I want to head towards, because if that gives you peace of mind, then great. But at the same time, you need to be open to opportunities, because um, sometimes sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? So you don't know what opportunity could be there that is really great for you as a person or as a career. And what you said about being present, I mean, this is the key of everything. I was also very skeptical a few years back about all this like mindfulness and whatnot, but in a very difficult time for me in Japan, I listened to this book. I listened because I was doing an audio, The Power of Now. And I thought it was so simple, but so true, that you really, like, being aware that, at the end of the day, life is just life. And sometimes you have, a lot of money. Sometimes you may not have a lot of money. Sometimes you have a great job. Sometimes you don't. But you have to remain somehow calm, and it's still you're not defined by your job or other things that you have. So I think you need to, at least for me, I try to navigate life in a way that I try to stick, or I try to be true to myself, and I try to make decisions based on what I think makes me happy and what I think I should do. But I don't take things too seriously. So except for the kid part, of course.
I love that. I think that that is a very beautiful philosophy and attitude to have towards life. Grecia, I'm so pleased to have had this time with you, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thanks a lot, Joe. Thanks for inviting me, and it was really great talking to you, and it's also been really great listening to other episodes. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you for coming.